Good morning. My hearing's all jacked up. It's all stopped up. What's up? Good morning. This is Friday. Hope you guys are doing well. I know we haven't been live that much this week. Not a lot going on. There's a lot going on. There's not a lot going on. So it is Friday. It is Friday, Sterling. So let's change something here. I hope everyone is doing well. I hope that um, you're happy, healthy, and at least looking towards a positive future. There we go. We adjusted that. And I hope you have a strategy in place for the first quarter. If you are an owner operator. Well, looks like I'm going to get a package today. Yay. All right. So, anyways, I know I've been kind of quiet here lately. There's really not much to talk about. So I figured I would go over some strategies. Some people have been sending me some emails. I don't know if that's even proper. A lot of email has been sent my way talking about some different things that are going on. Sometimes people send me these graphs and charts and don't really explain them. And then some people like to send me email and you should talk about this and excuse me. And sometimes I'm not sure what to do with it, but I'm very grateful for the email. At the end of the day, I'm under this deal where you just got to do what you got to do. So this is probably the final. I don't know. I might go live tomorrow night. Maybe it's New Year's Eve. We don't really go all out on New Year's Eve. There's a friend of mine that has these killer metal parties down there in Bella Vista, Arkansas. But man, then I got to drive down there and then drive back, and usually it has some bands playing. So I doubt I'll do that. I don't like going out New Year's Eve. I think I can count on. Well, I think I can count on one hand how many times I've been out and about on New Year's Eve. Now, usually I'm trucking over New Year's, so usually, but a lot of that's dependent on the weather. But we'll do our shout outs, then we'll look at some low board stuff, and then I'll tell you about some strategies that I do for the first quarter and things that you should be looking for if you're a van driver. Now, reefer is going to be a different story, and obviously flatbed as well. Got my Iron Maiden mug coffee, and yeah. Hopefully, Pale Rider will be home soon so he can enjoy the gift I gave him. See, Pap, your birthday's tomorrow. You and I aren't too far apart, man. Let's see. Sterling, who dis? Southbound Pachyderm, what's up? Grafton, good morning. Desert Okie Pam, good morning. Hope all is well with you. Jamie O, good morning and happy new year to all. Trucker Jason, good morning. And chat. It is Friday, Sterling. Get your crap together. Grafton, Friday. Yes. Cascade, good morning. CPAP, happy new year. Greg Zimmer, good morning. Hope you're doing well, especially after yesterday. Pale Rider TV, what's up? Pale Rider should be live tonight. WCF, what up, Snorelord? Happy New Year's Eve. Happy New Year's Eve. CPAP, my birthday tomorrow. One more year to the big 50. Now, CPAP, let me ask you a question. Are you going to do anything special for your 50th birthday? I know a lot of people see that as a milestone. I know a friend of mine's doing this big, huge traveling event that he's going to do for his 50th. I bought myself one of those things, that does that for my 50th birthday. That's my everyday carry now too. So that's how I celebrated my 50th birthday, by purchasing something I probably didn't even really need. Yes, Pale Rider. Everybody is a youngster towards you. To you, Wheel Burner. Good morning, my good man. Hope you are well. Wheel Burner. I'm gonna have to say, um, I'm gonna be honest with you. Okay, here you go, Wheel Burner. I did not watch a whole lot of your 5-hour live feed. You go live a long time, and um, and that's great. But you did a video before that yesterday talking about knowing when to get out, right? Knowing when to get out. And I think that video should have been made. It was a great video, but it should have been made 6 months ago. And you make a good point that don't lose everything just to keep your truck running. And you know, every business owner should have an exit plan. The worst case scenario, or in some cases, the best case scenario. So, anyways, Sterling says, "We missed you, low board barbarian." Maybe that's what I'll name the other channel. Last Florida dry van load of the year, rate 3,000. Maybe you might do something for yourself. Don't feel bad, CPAP. I turned 50 a week before Thanksgiving. My daughter turns 18 and 23, and I turned 50. Yeah, we had milestones. My son turned 21. My youngest turned 18. And my wife turned 50. So a bunch of milestones here. We really didn't do a whole lot. So we went to the World War I museum. That was the big event, I think, for everybody. And that, if you haven't done that, the World War I museum in Kansas City, and you're a history person, I definitely recommend it. Florida outbound. That is, wow. Probably going to California, right? For 3,000. Checking in from Lynchburg. You know all the customers being Old Pumpkin. Yeah, I didn't really run that area a whole lot. And I think the most I did a video on it too. I picked up a load of Amish pallets, middle of nowhere. That's on one of my GoPro vlogs, and then went into Pennsylvania, and I did a smartass video about being in Pennsylvania, and then where I actually throw my map, because I was lost, and made the joke that I'd never go to Pennsylvania, which it's funny to me because I make myself laugh because that's important, but because I know Pennsylvania pretty good because I used to go there all the time, but. So that video's up there, and I forget what I got out of there for Snyder. I took the pallets to Caterpillar, and I did a no-no. I wasn't wearing my steel-toe boots, and I went in there, and they're like, "You better have steel-toe boots." And I just kind of looked at them. They looked at my shoes, and they looked at me, and like, "Oh, it looks like you got them." I'm like, yeah, I've got them. So dropped the trailer, and then the empty that they picked up was a brand spanking new Schneider trailer with the door ripped off of it. So I had to scramble to finally get a trailer, and I think ended up in Mattel somewhere to get a trailer, and then I got the hell out of Dodge. We are all old farts now. Speak for yourself, CPAP. I'm a youngster. In Pale Rider's eyes, we're youngsters, so that's how you have to look at it. Thank you for your kind words. The video idea only came after watching Cash and DIY. I agree. The video should have been done at least 6 months ago by me or anybody else. You know, it's when it comes to I think people on YouTube or any social media for that matter, especially Facebook, are a little bit too judgmental. I think that we all have our own definition of what failure is and what success is. And that's the problem with social media. And it's bad enough to have to give up something that you love doing. And then we put it out for the whole world to see and we just get ostracized for it. And so I think that there's a fear of failure, but only because the public, how you think that people are going to view you. So what I did when I bought my first truck was, a lot of people have this failure's not an option, and a lot of times when people say that failure is not an option, it's the inability to plan for the big what if. And this is just my opinion. So if you want to ostracize me, that's whatever. Let me explain. I'm going to go back to the music world for a second. So if you search it out, there's a documentary called "The Decline of Western Civilization Part 2: The Metal Years." And it was showing it was a documentary series showing the decline of Western civilization, basically the Western world, and it would show the punk rock scene. That was the first one, but the second one showed the metal years, and they were talking to all these up and coming glam metal bands, and Megadeth and Motorhead, and there were so many of those younger bands that the guy was like, "So what if you don't make it?" And he's like, "But I'm going to make it." "But what if you don't?" "But I'm going to make it." "Yeah, okay, so great determination, great passion, yada yada yada. But what if you don't?" Um, but I am going to make it. It was a total refusal to accept the reality that you may not make it, especially in the music world. That's extremely difficult. And I think out of all those smaller bands, none of them ever became big. You know, Megadeth was already established. Motorhead, of course, was already established. And so when you buy a $150,000 vehicle, and you buy, a $40,000 trailer, you have to know what your exit plan is just in case something happens. What if it's something happens beyond your control, like you have a death in the family and you got to come home? Or, I've heard of that. I've heard of people losing their spouses and they have to get off the road to take care of their kids. Um, or take care of their parents. I lost a lot of time, helping my mom and dealing with the stuff that we had to deal with her a couple of years ago. And it's not just trucking that you can quote unquote fail at. Sometimes you have to close up shop due to circumstances that are beyond your control. That have nothing to do with your finances, has nothing to do with your budgeting, has nothing to do with your costs or expenses. It could be something at home, it could be your health. You might be diagnosed with something that allows you to not be able to drive. And so you have to have an exit plan, in my opinion. And it's not failure. Yeah, failure is not an option, but failure is how you learn, as long as you learn from it. If you buy a $240,000 truck and you go out of business because your costs are too high, well, guess what? If you decide to buy another truck, you're not going to buy a $240,000 truck. You're going to buy something a lot cheaper, according to the lifestyle that you lead at home. So to have an exit plan, there's nothing wrong with that. To take a step back, there's nothing wrong with that. Big Rig CO, everybody knows who he is. He's had a couple of lease purchase programs, but he finally completed the best one. In my opinion, the best lease purchase option out there. And he's doing very well for himself. But don't think he doesn't have an exit plan if needed. So I have one. Urban Network Trucking Podcast, Nebraska. Never tell a woman's age. Cascade. Is that a knock against me? Lately, I've been away from my area, short on loads. Yeah, and that's going to happen this time of year at Schneider. It's the whole trailer pool is going to be jacked up. Normal stuff is not going to be there, and abnormal stuff will be there. So, Stuart, the hobby trucker. Good morning. That one guy loves the Amish. Steel toe Crocs. Used to pick up Frito-Lay in Lynchburg all the time when I left the house when I worked for the Big Orange. I'll probably do an end of year numbers video sometime, probably in January. Trucking with T-Bone, good morning. What's this I hear the FMCSA wants e-logs and all CMVs beginning January 1st? Yeah, I think they're good luck getting them in the old trucks. If poop hits the fan, my plan is to run back to LTL and sell everything that the business owns. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, though. Plenty of local jobs around me, so that makes it easier. We have several backup plans that we can fall back on if our situation changes, but there's always been an exit strategy if the game becomes unwinnable. There you go. Good morning. Interesting. We're talking exit plans this morning. I'm renting my reefer trailer out in January and focusing my energy on a new business. And look, I encourage everybody to watch Shark Tank. I love that show. We have it on the DVR. That's kind of a nightly dinner ritual here at the house. Is we'll watch that, and I absolutely enjoy it. And if you want to get a handle of a business entrepreneur mindset, and then they'll have their updates and they all these businesses had to pivot during 2020. And trucking's no different. I know somebody that's got 3 different kinds of trailers. He can choose any one he wants, depending on what the market's doing. The most successful people I knew at Landstar had a flatbed and a van that they owned. They'd switch back and forth depending on what time of year. I'm not saying you got to go out and do that, but I'm saying that there are ways to stay in the game. But the reality is that depending on how you want to run and what your needs are, that's what determines whether you're going to make it or not. So What's up, Chuck? Mr. Charles? So I figured I'd go over some low board stuff, and then so here's some strategies. Here's some strategies of what I look for in the first quarter. All right, I'm writing this down so I can cut this up later. About early January, loads tend to cancel a lot, or they may not have enough product. So just be aware of that. So try not to put yourself in a position that if you can control it, try not to put yourself in a position where you've only got like 4 load options if things fall apart. Just like your business needs an exit strategy, where you run needs an exit strategy. Good morning, Matt. Okay. Um First 2 weeks of the year usually is inventory. So there's a lot of places like what Sean is pointing out that normally ship that don't. And or aren't, or instead of 10 loads a week, they're only doing 1 load a week. Rates can usually be fairly decent in January. You know, a lot of people think that January 1st, boom, rates take a dump, but not usually. I just scored a pretty high paying load going out west because it was hot, it was high value, and they were desperate for it. And the broker used the term, "We're taking a loss on this." Well, I've been taking a loss all year, so join the crowd. Not really, but you know, that's what you want to say to him sometimes. So, the end of January, you should start looking for these things. Number one, this is van now. Okay, van. First thing I look for is mulch, outdoor garden type stuff. Mulch, bricks, gravel, that stuff will start shipping. It tends to be cheap, it tends to be heavy, bricks especially. But mulch, it just depends. Um, One of the other things that can keep you afloat is beverages. Beer, soda, water. Water not as much, but the beer and soda is definitely a big one for all the sports events. You know, you got the Super Bowl, you got March Madness, and the raw materials associated with that, cans, packaging, plastic wrap, things of that nature. If your business is solely based around like shipping, like Amazon type stuff, you're going to be at the slowest part of the year. Unless a lot of people start using their gift cards and everything else that they got. So sometimes there's some fluctuation with retail. A lot of times, but there is a downward trend. Early February is when you should start seeing equipment such as tractors, lawnmowers, tillers, any lawn and garden variety, and grills. Now, I don't know what grill sales were last year. People love to eat, people love to cook out. It's cheaper to buy a grill and host a party versus going out to some fancy deal. So the places that supply you with grills, that's you know, a lot of that is usually cross docked from a container, but there are some of that there is some of that is built here in the States. So look at your local shippers, see what you have around you. If if you like a lot of home time. Um, but beverages are big because everybody loves their Carbolicious. If you look at the stocks for Coke and Pepsi, they're usually pretty steady growth. People will always have the addictive Carbolicious that they want. So the biggest challenge in January and February with the beverages is freeze protect. So if there is a downtick of that kind of freight, look at the weather. It's probably going on a reefer. Um, so the weather plays a factor in a lot of this as well. If there's going to be an uptick in freight, you will notice a lot of pallet loads starting to pop up. Pallet loads are a huge commodity and is responsible for a big part of my money when I was running my truck at Schneider and here in the spot market. But with that comes risk. A lot of times you're pulling nails out of your tires constantly, and some of these pallet places are not gentle with their trailer. The other thing I look for personally is out of Bolivar, Missouri. There is a plastic flower place. Um, so that there's Memorial Day that happens, and a lot of people are, so a lot of those are great loads because they usually pay decent and they're light. They're hand loaded, but they get on it, and they do a pretty good job. So these are things that I look for. So mulch, beverages, packaging, and said raw materials for such things. Paper loads are always in season, usually, but a lot of people don't like hauling that, and paper mills can tend to be a bother. I know that there's one in Morrilton, Arkansas. It's guaranteed I'm going to be there for a little bit. So this year I will be learning what the reefer seasonal shifts are. So, and I will share that information as I learn it. So I'm we'll see. I know that produce is a given one, and the other thing to look for February March is flowers. Some of that can go on a van. Flowers are light and usually fairly easy deliveries. They can trash your trailer a little bit, especially if they're all wet and everything going in there. Um, trees, trees. I know several people that would haul trees this time of year, around February. So these are the things I look for when it comes to first quarter freight. And then as you get closer to, so I've noticed that distribution centers like Walmart, Dollar General, they tend to start earlier every year when it comes to filling their DCs with the things that need to go to the stores for springtime. I mean, look at the world we live in. You have before Christmas is done, you got Valentine's Day, crap being displayed. And a lot of that's last year's stock. Um, that's how Halloween is. So these are the things that, the other thing I look for is charcoal. I mentioned grills earlier. Charcoal is a big one for me. I've got plants in West Plains, Bell, Rolla, Branson. So if you live in Missouri or you want to run Missouri, charcoal can be a good thing. And you'll notice that you'll see a bunch of loads all at once for like Dollar General. You'll see Branson to Ardmore, Branson to Fulton, Branson to Zanesville. Branson to Indianola, Mississippi, or West Plains or any other origins I mentioned. And then the next year, then the next week you might see all the Walmart DCs. You'll see West Plains to Harrisonville, West Plains to Washington Courthouse, West Plains to, and you'll see it on the low board. It's all Walmart DCs. I know that Walmart is still struggling with some supply chain issues. I don't know who's in charge of their supply chain, but I needed some distilled water for my CPAP machine, and I end up having to be a hoarder because I haven't been able to find it for the last 2 weeks. Finally, one of the Walmarts had just gotten it in, and I bought like 5 bottles because I'm not dealing with this every month. And when I'm in the truck, I also carry extra bottles of water too. So, um, but charcoal's a big one. Um, then stuff associated with that activity of barbecuing and tailgating and all that. So, um, we have a local French's plant, French's mustard. So a lot of that stuff starts shipping. For springtime. So just recognizing and knowing your area. And so if you're new to this game and you're trying to learn, I recommend looking at low boards even when you don't need to. Look to see, put an alert in your low board if it has an alert system to see what's coming out of your area at all times. And charcoal is a big one for me. It's heavy, it's dumb, but you know what? They usually pay pretty good. I once I got $5 a mile to go from here to Temple, Texas. $2,500 to go down to Temple from Branson, Missouri. So I mean, it's that was a good load, and then I got a load of water going to Tulsa for a decent rate, and then from Tulsa, I picked up something out of Joplin, and so I mean, in finding the loads, see if you constantly look at the load board, which is what you have to do if you're in the spot market. If you don't have a dispatch service or you don't, if you dispatch yourself, you constantly have to look to see what's out there coming in and out of your area. So you can create a relationship with those brokers that have those loads. For me, the problem that I run into though is like, the charcoal. Well, everybody's got those. Obviously the local charcoal plants use a 3PL. So you have all kinds of different brokers, on them. So it's hard to pinpoint. But what I will notice is, it looks like Ryan Trans has all the charcoal loads going to Dollar General. It looks like C.H. Robinson's got all the charcoal loads going to Walmart. It looks like Convoy's got all the Pepsi loads going everywhere. So I recognize that because I know my area. I've lived here since 1986, and Springfield, Missouri is a great trucking spot. I mean, we have several mega carriers here, and there's a lot of small, mid-sized carriers here. So just these are the things I look for. Let's go back to comments here. Matt, Matt, what's up? Brother, I'm just out here running around experimenting with the high cost of low living. That's a good comment. What's up, brother? Nathaniel, what's up? I delivered my load in Denver yesterday in a blizzard on time. Broker didn't want to give me more money for my excellent service. Then I suggest not working with that broker if you can help it. I suggest that everyone waits till the end of March. Hopefully, everything should pick up by then. Just getting ready to pick up my load to South Texas to run through the New Year holiday. There you go. It seems like that's where I was always running, doing New Year's, because a lot of times you're avoiding weather, or I was avoiding weather. I know that you're not afraid of the weather, being a Michiganer. Um, but I like, yeah. I mean, Texas can be a good run, and a lot of people might disagree with that, but CDN is late. Good morning. One thing I learned a long time ago: anything "quote unquote" food related has always been recession proof as far as trucking goes. Yeah, Buck Brown. I mean, where the challenge is freeze protect. So canned goods, beverages, you got to worry about that, especially if you have a polar vortex or a bomb cyclone. All these scary names that they give crappy weather. So, um, but I agree with that. Consumable goods that really, I mean, they slow down. Look, what happened a lot of times is like when fuel got really high, a lot of the small carriers around here just called up the brokers and said, "Hey, all your coke loads you got this week, we'll take all of them. We've got 10 trucks. Just give me every single one." And so they never hit the low board. Um, so there's a lot of that happens as well. A lot of the good stuff, short stuff was swallowed up around here. So loves in Kentucky getting a PM, then on down to the house. Happy New Year, Snorelord and chat, Killians. Happy New Year to you. Taking truck dealer to, not sure what that all means. Ashley, hey Snorelord, what's your program? A lot. What's your program? A lot and a small trucking company, and I need your advice. Well, I'm not sure what you're asking. Having a claim issued that my insurance company don't want to cover. Um, you can email me. The email's in the description, and try to explain clear what you're dealing with. Russell, are you saying you're taking your truck back to the dealer? Is that what you're saying? I hope this stays up. I can't keep up making notes. Huge nuggets of knowledge being shared this morning. Thank you, Steve. CDN, you're welcome. Yeah, it'll stay up. I don't plan on going off the rails yet. Got a coolant Air Canada stock engine icon in the middle of nowhere. I got a stop engine light in a cooler, and I can't. I'm taking my truck back to the dealer. Oh, okay. Yeah, I suspect my truck's going to light up like a Christmas tree soon. My batteries are dead, and I was like, well, I can pay for somebody to come jump me, or I can buy one of them things that will jumpstart your truck. But some of those get pretty pricey. I don't know how much it would pay for it, but I do need some kind of trickle charger to keep on the truck, so I don't have to keep running the APU. But last year at this time, I was dealing with on Super Bowl Sunday. I had a load, and I had all kinds of issues because the battery died and the fuel filters went bad and everything else. Is it me or has fuel started trickling up? I have not been paying attention to fuel prices. Um, even though Jeff sends us um, the list every morning, I really don't look at it that much. We also have an app now that we can look at our fuel prices. So, but I've that's normal for this time of year, I think. So, all right, guys, I don't have anything pressing. So I'll tell you what, I'll put a link here. And if you guys want something to add, go for it. We can look at a low board if no one wants to come in. The rule is if you're driving, turn your camera off. And, don't incriminate yourself. And I got to know you. I got to be able to. I got to be able to tell that you're not a troll or whatever. So, insurance. So much to study and discuss on this topic. And I agree with that, CDM, but I don't really have a whole lot of experience with insurance. Jeff handles the renewals. I know that our insurance company loves us because of our rating and because we have the cameras in the trucks. And Samsara is a great platform for safety. I love it. I love Samsara. And I'm not trying to sell you it either. I'm just telling you I love Samsara. I when it comes to cargo claims, I don't think we've had one. And obviously that risk gets increased with reefer loads, but um I know people have been running reefers for a long time that don't have any cargo claims, so it's not like it's plagued with it. There's just a higher chance for it. But I don't really. So I do know that how your bills are signed if there's damage. I think that's important. So Gayrard, do I have that name right, Ashley? If you're still listening, how the bills are signed, how the load was secured. And so one of the things, here's a nugget for you. Ready? Here's a nugget for anybody listening. Before you close the trailer doors, if you have the ability, because I know some reefer loads you can't, take a picture of what the securement looks like and what it looked like at the beginning of the trip. Take a picture before you seal that door. Send that to the broker. Okay? You all should have a smartphone by now. So when you do a check call, and this is what helps your rates too, when you send a check call, say, truck is loaded, attached is a picture of the load secured and the trailer sealed. Show the seal number, get a close up of it, show the seal number with the seal intact. Cover your butt. Now, reefer, that could be a little bit of a problem, especially if you go one of those docks where you don't even have to get out and open your doors. If you're able to open the little peephole, take a picture that way. Some places want that sealed up too, which is understandable. But if you can, take a picture of that load secured. Also, have your logs ready. So if the load shifted or moved forward, you can show that there was no harsh brake event. We've had that issue. where we were able to show the broker that we've had no events while this driver was driving. And so the proof was trying to prove that it was the shipper's fault, not the driver's fault, because it always comes back on the driver. Always. And you could be the best driver in the world. All it takes is that one car to cut you off. All it takes is for some event to happen in front of you where you got to slam on the brakes. All it takes is like going through a tight neighborhood and you have to curb the trailer, thus making everything kind of shift. So that's where your load securement has to really be important. Don't just throw the 20 pallets in there and not even throw a strap. If it goes all the way back to the doors, take a picture of that. Like pallets, you can't really secure pallets, right? And they go all the way to the back door. But usually you don't get cargo claims on pallets. If they're brand new, they're going to be steady. They're going to be fine. And if they're all broken pallets, well, that's probably what your shipment is, broken pallets to get repaired. So they don't care about that. And the other important part is be willing to restack it if needed. I'll give you a perfect example. So I used to haul a lot of beer out of Fort Worth, Texas, Miller Coors. The way Miller Coors wants you to load it is you create a bulkhead 10 feet from the nose of the trailer. You put straps. Now, some guys would put like 3 straps across, and then other guys would crisscross them. Or you can buy a bulkhead. It's basically a cheap wooden thing that you put in the front because they center loaded the beer. So what they do is you put your straps up, they put these big plastic things, and then they bump the pallets up against those. And then it comes back, and then they put the plastic things up, and then you got to tie it down, you strap it down, and it's centered loaded. The problem with that is that straps are great at holding things. It's the clips that have the issues. And the Fort Worth beer loads always went to Springfield, Missouri. That was how we got back to the yard. This is when I was a company driver. And I was going through US 69. That's your best way to get down there or back up to Springfield. A lot of traffic lights. Well, as I was going through Durant, Oklahoma, there by the Choctaw Casino, there was a cop sitting there. And I saw that the light was stale, so I started slowing down. And then there was a car that was zipping around me, and he was like, he didn't see the cop until the last second and got in front of me, and then that light turned and he slammed on the brakes, thus creating my hitting the brakes. Now, I never locked up. I never got a harsh brake event. And all of a sudden, kaboom! My truck jumped forward about 10 feet. I was lucky not to hit the car. That beer shifted forward. So that those 3 straps I put down, the clips were no match. The clips that go into the posts were no match for 45,000 pounds of beer shifting forward. So my air gauge goes from here to there. I'm like, ah. So we had to take a good different way to get around, to get back to the yard because obviously I was going to be overweight on my drives now. So I get to the yard and I told my trainer about what happened, because he was still he and I still talked on the phone after I was done training. He goes, "Well, here's what you need to do. Tell the company, and then bump the dock there at our facility, and restack that beer so you don't get charged." And so that's what I did. I backed to the dock, opened the seal, restacked the beer. There was only about 3 cases of beer that were lost. And we put a new seal on it and I delivered it. So there's that kind of things that you have to work it out as well. So Pigtail, I didn't see a sneak in here. I don't know if you're still watching. SST, I see you too. So having the ability to restack your load is important. So it can help you from a cargo claim. Sorry, I'm checking some messages here. So Nevada, good morning. All right, since no one wants to jump in, let's look at some low board stuff. So it's Friday, all right? It's a holiday weekend. Again, you got New Year's Day on Sunday. And of course, the federal holiday is probably going to be January 2nd. Now, oh, here we go. Here's CDN. What's up? I was just about ready to get into the boring low board stuff.
Good morning. Just want to make sure I had no feedback. How are you?
Good. Good.
That's good. No, I thought I'd just jump in. It's end of the year. Want to wish you, happy New Year and so forth. And the other thing was just to basically remind that, we got a message this week, first time ever. I mean, we get weekly messages with our brokerage and updates and so forth. And one of the things that was interesting is the 3 things that they brought up was one was, they're calling that sometime 2023, this beginning might be uncertain times with the overall economy. And so they are watching the credit levels with our customers a little bit more than normal. And just trying to get some focus here. So they are watching the credit levels. They said in some cases they might be reducing because I have some significant credit with some customers. So, and I know that other agents as well. So they could be in a position where they might be looking at different customers in different situations and reducing that credit amount if things stay that way. And that's the first time ever I've seen that. The other one was during these times, number one is for both carriers and brokers, they were bringing it to us from a broker standpoint. Don't become desperate when freight gets tight and you're trying to book loads. Things are getting tighter. Maybe customers start shopping, and you're trying to be competitive because customers are looking for better rates. Don't fall that someone comes in with this cheap rate and they're a carrier that we're not familiar with. Don't fall for that. And that would be the same with you guys as carriers. You're on the spot market. You took a load somewhere. You thought you got paid pretty good. Then you're looking on the market and it's getting tight, and you're seeing that loads are scooping up pretty quick. And all of a sudden you come across a load at the broker that you haven't worked with before, and it seems like the rate's too good to be true, or something's too good to be true, and you don't know them. Don't fall for it. If you've been around this marketplace for a minute, do your due diligence. And
absolutely.
Like I have a sub agent, as you know now, and I just came across that exact situation. Sub agent calls me up. He's looking at the market, and he has this load where the customer, they bid it out to multiple people, and he's new to the game, obviously. So he comes across this carrier and talking about it, and this carrier had the best rate option. And I started looking at the carrier. Okay, it's not that they're being new is not terrible, but I had some spidey senses go up, and I started looking at their social profiles and other things that just kind of told me something's funny about them. And they did have a website, but you had to key it in directly. Like if I just typed the carrier's name in, it wasn't found. And when I did find the website, it had a bunch of stock pictures, which a lot of websites do. Mm-hmm. But what the red flag was the majority of the stock pictures were European trucks, which we don't carry here.
Right.
The other red flag was under the contact us, their company address was not listed. Like, even if they work from home as a carrier, your home office is your home, they didn't list that. And that's a concern to me. When you have if you have a company website and you don't list your head office, that's a concern. So those, so just do your diligence. And if you have to, call on networks, find the ways. And like, sure, I know some people have different views of Carrier 411. Everyone's got different views of DAT review boards and so forth. But do your diligence to see whatever you can do to weed out. I have a couple forums, in fact, I use that have been very helpful for me over the years. So just as the next quarter comes into play, when you're working, if there's new brokers you're seeing, just really take a moment to question. Now, if your factoring company is going to factor them, that's good enough backing right there. But if you're not using factory and you're putting them, you're holding the money yourself and waiting the 30 days, do some checks. And there's lots of ways to check, but just be diligent, both broker side and carrier side, when things get tight in that side of it. So in there, and then the third thing is, this is the time to double down, right? If things are going to be slow or tight, or rates aren't where we think they should be, instead of saying, well, I'm going to sit back and wait for the rates to go, no, this is the time you double down. There's no who cares about New Year's resolutions? Those last a minute. If you want to make a change, you start today. You make the small changes now. And that includes, if things are slower, then use that time to review your business. What was a pain for you last year? Was it your IFTA took too long? Was it your books took too long? What can you do to change that? What new skills do you need to learn to make things better? What technologies are you not using, or that you are currently using, that they might be better? Like, if you're not using any software of an accounting style, like you're just putting your stuff in a shoebox, or you're doing it pen to paper, if it's working for you and you have a great system, fine, stick with it. But if you're using whatever software you're using, but if you're not, this is the time. Whether it's you wanted to get yourself onto, you're going to build your own Excel web sheet, that's fine. There's no problems with it. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. But start January 1st, because then you get your books going. So, you're down to 48 hours here to make a decision. That if you depending what you're doing, or if you have a system, some antiquated accounting software that was desktop based, I suggest, I highly encourage, go on, Sage Accounting, QuickBooks. There's other ones out there. Use their free versions. Jump onto it today. Don't wait. Do the search. Jump on for the free version and play around. Then all you have to do is go on YouTube. All these companies have how-to videos. Take a look at the interface. What one makes sense? Because this way you can start January 1st with your new books. You can have your old stuff and finish up last year's taxes the way you normally do it. But effective January 1st, all your new expenses, all your new income are going to get rolled into the new tax software, right? And even if you use an accountant, it can be super helpful to have an accounting software, because some of your accountants will say, yeah, if you have QuickBooks, the QuickBooks feature has it that you can share that with your accountant. So you've entered stuff, and it's actually, and then the last key I could say about accounting software, I'm not an expert by no means. There's many other people on this forum and your network that may or may not be here that have a lot more knowledge around the books, but I can say from my experience, whatever you're classified as a business, whether you're a sole proprietor, incorporated, limited liability, doesn't matter. Whatever your category is, if you've relied on an accountant or a bookkeeper, that's fine, no problems. But just take an old tax form. Find out what's your expense, what categories. When you handed them a shoebox of your receipts, what are the actual categories? That's the tip right there. Is if you're going to jump onto an accounting software, one of the errors I've seen happens is that the nice thing about the accounting software is, if you're at Rona or you're at Harbor Freight and you're buying some part, it's nice. You can come back to your truck, take a picture of the receipt, create the entry into your accounting software right then and there. You're not waiting until the end of the week. You're doing it on the fly, or at the end of the day, or at the start of the next morning when you're having your coffee, right? So, but the key is, you'll think, oh, okay, this is this kind of expense. And then all of a sudden, at the end of the year, you'll see, oh, well, I've got like 3 of these really similar expenses, but they're actually only one. But because you kept keying them in, you would add this expense and add a manual version of it, and you just slightly worded it differently. No, the key is if you're going to an accounting software, take a minute, look back to your previous tax books, whatever your business type you're registered as, know your ledger. So if you look on your tax and it's a code, there's a code for office expenses. What constitutes office expenses? What constitutes, where does your, when you purchase windshield washer fluid versus purchasing, like when you, like I know in Canada, when you subscribe to software, I have a certain category for that, right? If you have to know your get to know your tax, use this opportunity. You don't have to be a tax expert, but study it a little bit. Just get to know, familiarize yourself with where things should go. So once you set that ledger and get your accounting, you pay your accountant to help you do that. Set up the ledger in your accounting software, because this way you should, once you set your ledger, you should never manually add another category unless it's a new expense that you've never ever had and you found out that, yeah, okay, now I need to do it. But 9 times out of the 10, you're going to just keep the same basic structure and you're only adding those expenses there. And then you can, yeah, like I said, the odd time you may need to change that. So, but take a look. That's just one simple step that you double down on. Our business, like you mentioned about your safety stuff, what's your, if your logbooks or your ELD software and so forth, but really focusing and double down and honing skills that's going to help you launch your business in 2023. And that even includes your social media presence. As far as if someone searches your company, if you can't find yourself on the internet, that's another trigger that you should do something, because it's pretty cheap to create just a simple one-page website, has your name and number with the services, the areas that you service, the type of equipment you run, so that when people are looking at, see you on a load board, and then they search your MC number, they might come across you on some other sites, but when you have a bit of a presence, a website that actually matches all the information that they see, that's a good start. But if you have a crappy website that looks suspicious, well, then people won't be interested to work with you.
Good words, my friend. What's up, Gary?
Just doing my normal mic check first.
Oh, you're good.
Okay. Yeah. I just jumped in. I thought, you're doing a drive-in strategy kind of look forward, and I'm flatbed, so I just thought, hey, if you're going to go to the load board, maybe you can just throw up a flatbed. I'm in Omaha, Nebraska, to check out the load board that you use a little bit more. And I just sent off for maybe, a couple loads with someone. I'm waiting for a response, but I thought it might be something that we could look at.
I got a question.
Sure, go ahead.
No, you finish your question. You finish your thought, and I'll just add it.
I just basically did finish the thought or comment. Yeah.
So, question for you, for people thinking about flatbeds, is how often do you replace your straps, or do you see that you have to replace your straps?
It's a good question. I would say you need to plan on a year for everything except for the chains and binders. Anything that's not metal, I would say you need to have it budgeted in.
You nailed it, Gary. I know this answer, and that's why I wanted to bring it up, because I've had issues. I had a situation last year where I had a carrier that was supposed to deliver a load. It was secured on their trailer. They couldn't make the load delivered. So my customer called me saying, hey, we have this product sitting on this customer's yard. So they hired me to get a carrier. I got a carrier willing to do it. It was kind of an odd situation. I can't really just divulge everything, but the main part of the situation was the carrier I hired is a trusted carrier I've worked with for many years. He shows up. I know him personally. He shows up and he calls me up and says, Rob, I can't haul this load. He sent me pictures, and I could pull those pictures up. All the straps were frayed. So we went to the company owner, and he just told us to F off, basically, in polite words. He was not willing to remove the straps. He was not willing to adjust. My driver said, I'll go back and get my own straps. No, you're not touching this freight. And so the point was that as part of if you're going into a flatbed business, strap management is huge, because it just takes one commodity, and it's up to a driver to have the experience when a shipper says, yeah, just strap this down, and you're like, this is going to break my strap. You either have to put the corner protectors, or you have to do things to mitigate that. But you need, and then chains and binders. Probably once a quarter, you got to lube them up a little bit. You got to take the binders, and at least spray them up, hang them on your rub rail when you're on a time off, and just manage them, look through them all. But it's a huge part of the flatbed business. And also, if you're a flatbedder, I would say if you're a person getting into it, if you've always done, say, straight commodities where you're just strapping and you don't do a lot of chaining, and things are getting quiet, use this time to hone that skill that you have. Get yourself more comfortable with chains and binders, knowing when to use them at the sizes that are necessary. 3/4, 5/8. Like, it seems like Gary's got a lot of knowledge as far as overall chaining and flatbed and strapping. But I think that it's an art. Would you agree, Gary? Strapping and chaining a load?
Well, there's like a minimum requirement and a securing, but outside of that, yeah, it does take a little bit of a common sense approach sometimes. And there are a few tricks that allow you to strap or chain down a couple pieces of equipment, I guess, to be in compliance with the regulations. Yeah, there's a securement book that also tells you the when you have, I think it's 1/4 of an inch, but it might be 3/4 of an inch worth of frayed or holes poked in your strap when that strap is no longer good. So yeah, the DOT wants to get tricky.
And you got to know your commodities. When you need a header board, typically you need your 2 straps in the first 10 feet, 2 straps in the back 10 feet, and then you can go 1 strap there afterwards. But if you don't have it, you can download the FMCSA load securement book and start reading it, and read it multiple times. Because if you show up, for example, a straight shipper where they're shipping one commodity is one thing, but if you show up at a job site where there's a construction equipment coming back, you might have a bobcat that needs to get chained down, and then you might have some boxes or other materials that need strapping, and then so you have to jigsaw this load together, and you need to help the shippers know your weights, how much weight you can handle at different parts of your trailer, so that you can equally disperse the weight and so forth. So there's, some shippers, they have a great system. You show up, they have a standard, they know how to chimney stack it so that the weight's dispersed. It's the same commodity. Those ones are a little bit easier. But when you got mishmash loads, that's when you need to take a minute, look at the weights, stand back, and figure out, because, basically, I always look at it when I've helped drivers, is you want it so when you're going down the turn, if you're on the turnpike, that load's not going to fall off. If your truck, someone hit you and you went in the ditch for whatever reason, that load's still on the trailer, right? Would that be a fair assessment, Gary?
Yeah, generally speaking, if there is an event like that, the load should still be on the trailer.
a hard break, right? That things aren't shifting.
Well, I mean, even if the trailer and tractor separate, and go their separate ways, the load should still be attached to the trailer whenever it finally stops.
And what would you say are the 2 most dangerous commodities to be chained secure for load securement standards?
Everything that I've also been told is steel, and a lot of it is because of the steel on steel chains. They will slide, so you need to have a little extra false bulkheads or techniques like strapping the middle of let's say a long piece so that it bends or bows down in the middle a little bit, so that everything's not in a line, and just slides right through, and sheets of plates or whatever, making sure you do the cross X's on the corners. There are just a few things there.
Simple load like a light load of plastic tubes can actually be a nightmare because they're constantly shifting.
Oh yeah.
Those can be a real nightmare for a driver. But the two most dangerous that could potentially kill a driver are the steel pipe, particularly like for the oil field, steel pipe and coils, particularly because you got suicide and then regular loaded, right? And the regular loaded, because now that thing, if those chains ever break, that coil can roll back on you. And pipe, if you don't lock those collars and you don't belly strap it, and you have a hard shift, that pipe, especially if it's not been belly strapped, can shift forward, hit the sleeper, and penetrate right through the cab and kill a passenger inside the cab for sure.
Well, can I spin this question back to you on the broker side then to find out maybe what are some best practices that you like to follow as a broker?
From a flatbedding
yes,
standpoint? Well, as a broker,
sure.
Like
sure, you can do that too.
Specific to flatbed. So if I have a customer that has a flatbed load, if and where possible, if they've been local enough, I either try to utilize a couple things. So one, a lot of questions. What's the commodities? I think about myself, what's the commodity? What's my knowledge of the product that's being hauled? Because especially, let's say it's a new customer. I'll take from a new customer standpoint, and then it evolves to the point you gather knowledge. But the new customer standpoint, so my question is, what's the loading location look like? How is it going to be loaded? Like, forklift, gantry crane, what I try to ask the customer all these procedures. What's their loading procedures? What's their expectation? Because some shippers do have really well thought out, laid out. Other shippers just assume, they think as soon as the product hits because there's a lot of shippers that will, as soon as they put the skid or the equipment or the product on the driver's trailer, it's now the driver's full responsibility. They don't check the driver's loads. They believe that every driver is perfect and professional and knows exactly what they're doing. So asking a lot of questions for myself, procedure-wise, and discussing now, if I don't know if they have depending on what the product is and the commodity, if I'm not 100% sure, I go back to a load securement manual. I research. I'll talk to other carriers, explain to them what's doing, saying, what do you think that we need? Because if the customer's telling me one thing, just because the customer tells you that, it's still our responsibility as a broker and a carrier to do our due diligence, because sometimes the customer may not be right 100% of the time, and sometimes they might be. Say, I've been doing it for 20 years, the usual line. And maybe they're right? But we have to say, if they're not, what they're expecting the driver to do is not meeting the standards of the load securement requirements, that's when I'll interfere to the customer, saying, well, per page this of the load securement manual, the driver is required to have the following or do the following. Oh, I didn't realize that. When I send them the link and show them the pictures, unless they can defend it, then they might change their tune. So that's first parts. Because my job, I try to do is on my load confirmations is provide as much knowledge as possible. And I'll tell them, hey, be prepared. This might be a bit of a funky load. Have patience, have a lot of straps. Like I have a load I do with one particular customer. I've got multiple pictures of similar loads. It has it's only a strap loads, but requires, and sometimes it's a bit of a jigsaw puzzle. And because the product is not scaffolding, but from a distance would look like scaffolding, because scaffolding is another one that scaffolding can be great, because if you get them all nice and bundled when strapped together and then they load them, it works well. But if the bundles aren't very well put together, well, all those bits and pieces of scaffolding can easily start shifting on you quite quickly, especially going down the highway, hit one bump and stuff can shift in there. And so it requires a lot more strapping. So I try to leverage as much knowledge from the customer. And then if I get a carrier, if I get the load, I get a carrier in there, I try to, do something to get the carrier to provide me pictures of the load. So,
yeah, but I actually have a question for you. If you need to field Nevada's question, I can't see it.
Yeah, yes. You would think that shippers would check load securement before giving bills. Some do not.
That's right. I can share significant amount of stories where the shippers are not checking things, especially in dry van freight, where it's heavy skids. equipment being loaded inside trailers. They insist on going with trailers because they have a dock and it fits inside the trailers, but they believe that the drivers are 100% the professionals. So to answer Nevada's question, there is no simple answer. I would say this. For example, if you were loaded at a warehouse and they put equipment inside your truck and they did not let you be part of the loading process, you should insist before you sign said bills that you need to get in there. So if they don't allow you in the warehouse, you have to go to you have to say to the shipper, sorry, I have to look at this load. I need to pull forward, jump inside and take a look to see how it's loaded because I wasn't part of the loading process. So I need to verify that it's good enough. And if you're a company driver, take some pictures, send it to your dispatch and ask them, hey, am I good to go? Or what do you think? Talk to your safety manager, talk to a friend that may know about this stuff. Don't leave that facility until you're comfortable about this, especially with dry, heavy skids, things like an example would be like refrigeration coolers. Often when you're taking big coolers that are going to go to a new, like say they're replacing coolers at a grocery store or at a, some freezer warehouse, and they want to load them in vans because they want to go dock to dock, which is fine. But as you know, those coolers are tall, like a walk-in cooler, like a big enough that, they can be pretty much the height of the trailer, but they could be either top heavy because the compressors can be at the top, which makes them really unstable. But if the compressor's at the bottom, it's a little bit better. And depending on what kind of trailer you have, if you don't have a good logistics bars that you can strap it with, that's a bit sketchy because I've seen that. Those loads have shifted. They'll move to the left, to the right, too hard of a swing. So you gotta, there's no simple answer other than saying is each load is unique and different and treated as such. And go ahead.
I would think that liability is an issue too. So if you're at let's say you're at a shipper and you're picking up, your flatbed picking up shingles, right? That's a common load. They're not staring at every. They're getting 100 trucks in. They're not going to stare at every load. But the liability aspect is that if the driver goes on and the shipper told me that this was fine, and then it falls apart. I would think that liability is another issue. Why shippers don't pay? Why some shippers may not pay attention to how you tie something down.
Well, an example just literally a week ago, I did a load coming out of Texas back to Canada, and the product I believed should have corner protectors. The carrier actually called me. My driver's there saying he's trying to put corner protectors, and it's actually creating damage. It's a product that it's digging into the product. Mm-hmm. And so I talked to the shipper about it, and they said, yeah, no, normally we don't always have to use corner protectors. They said it's fine without, because I was worried that was going to actually, the straps will dig in and sink into the product, because that's what can happen with shingles. If you over tighten them, they can, you can cause damage in those corners. And the tip of that, if you're running into those issues where corner protectors are not working, but yet the straps are actually digging into the product on the flatbed load, then the trick is if the product is flat on the top, is using either dunnage, right, a 1x2 or 2x4s, or simply have the shipper put another skid on top. I've done that, seen that happen numerous times. You say you got a lot of times flatbed drivers will be cursed when they see a pallet filled with boxes on a flatbed, because as soon as you put a strap on that, it's going to crush it. So the trick is, if you have that, then you put a pallet on top, and then that, when you strap it down to over top of the pallet on top of the boxes, it disperses the tension on there. So there's but to your point with liability, and I think someone else mentioned that you said there's something about some kind of insurance issue where they're not going to pay. I can tell you from my experience that I've had 2 weeks ago, I had a situation. I picked up a load that it was computer software coming from Arizona, coming from near Arizona area, in the Arizona area back into Canada, and it was worth $169,000 US, so just like $197,000 Canadian or so. Checked with the carrier because I thought, well, maybe I'll have to get additional insurance. And I checked with the carrier, and they said, nope, we're covered for $250,000 as long as you declare the value on the bill of lading. You're fully covered. Meanwhile, I had another shipment, similar kind of thing, some high-end equipment. It was only 4 pallets. And I have a carrier I've been working with for years, and the value was pretty high on these 4 skids. So I talked to my carrier, said, if I put the value on here, does that cover it? And they said, if you put the value on here, we will not take the freight. In fact, we don't cover anything over $2 a pound. So we only cover $2 a pound, and there's no exceptions to that. So that might mean is, and I have another carrier that, they want everything banded, like they're an LTL carrier in Canada, and they always ask the question: is say you have a pump sitting on a skid. Well, in their mind, they want the pump in a box banded to the skid, because I think they had too many claims and their insurance rates went up in their policy, so they made a change that if it's not in a box banded to the skid, they will not provide any coverage. They don't deem that professionally packaged to withstand the rigors of LTL freight. So the point is, every carrier is different, unique. Take a look at your policy. If you're picking up, say, I'll give you the example, those refrigerated coolers. Say you got an auction house and some restaurant wants you to buy this, go to an auction house and pick up some coolers and bring it to their warehouse or something, and they're used. Often used equipment is only covered at $1 a pound versus new equipment at $2. And you need to read your policy. And if you don't know it, you need to call your broker or your insurance broker or your direct insurance company saying, look, I'm covered. I got $200,000 cargo insurance or $150,000. So if a customer tells me up front, hey, this is a high value load, it's worth $130,000. So if I destroy this load, is the customer 100% fully covered? No. Well, why am I paying $130,000? How do they get covered? Well, you have to actually, in that case, you have to provide a written email or a letter to us before the load and what the commodity is, and we have to review it. I didn't know that. Your insurance policy might say, yep, as long as it's declared on the bill of lading before you picked up, when you signed for it at the time of loading, if you don't see that declared value, then they're not covered. But if it's there, it's there. So every policy is different, unique. I highly, highly encourage, grab a coffee, grab your boring policy and read through it. And if you don't understand it, highlight the sections you don't understand. And then if you think to yourself from a shipper, broker standpoint, when they have questions about their cargo coverage and how a policy works and how does a claim actually work, if you can't explain the 5 steps to make a claim with your insurance company, like if you don't have that email address, like when you have a situation, do you phone a number? Do you just send an email? What's required to do this thing? And if the customer, how does this all work out? How is it paid? If you don't know this, find out. Get that. Make a sheet that you can, when it comes up, you can pull it out of your files of your company forms. That when they say, oh, we got a problem, and the driver calls you, that there's a procedures for that, and that will also tie into what Steve does as a safety person. If you have certain procedures required by your insurance company, you make sure every one of your trucks has the appropriate claim form, and that includes if a driver's at a shipper and slips and falls, do you require certain forms for your liabilities? So if you don't have these things, like you should have a master binder in your truck. I know we're in a digital age, but you should have, every one of your trucks should have a binder that has all the stuff in glossy, those page protectors that you can pull out. There's 5 copies of each one in there. And then once a quarter or once a year, you're making sure there's enough in there. And you put a thing on, if you put 5 on the last copy, you say master copy, do not use, request more copies, like make it simple for the drivers. And if you're a one-person carrier, then then you create this yourself, right? Am I wrong at that, Steve?
No, you're absolutely correct. No, I agree with that. So I'm gonna hit up Urban Networks Trucking Podcast comment here. There's a lot of dry van loads that should be block and brace: forklifts, tractors, coil steel, and aluminum bars. So I'll give you a funny story and a perfect example of that. So I picked up a load. It was around Jackson, Missouri. It has this weird name. I can't remember the name, but it was a lead plant, and they were closing down this lead plant because they had poisoned the water. So as you go through this plant, there's this neighborhood. Not one soul lives in this neighborhood, but all the houses are nice, the yard's nice because they have to maintain these lawns, but the whole neighborhood had to be they had the so they were getting ready to close this lead plant, and I was picking up lead blocks, and so this guy comes out in this Darth Vader costume, right? He's wearing the mask. He's like, and he's like, "All right, back your truck to this dock." He's in this enclosed forklift, and I'm sitting here in t-shirt and shorts, wondering if I'm a little underdressed for this situation. And he's like, "All right, so I'm gonna load these in the middle of your trailer, and then you need to block and brace them." I'm like, "Do I need any safety gear?" He's like, "No, you're fine." So here I am in the 100-degree heat in the dry van with a pathetic little hammer trying to drive in, 3-inch nails on really hard 2x4s, trying to secure these blocks while Darth Vader watches. And that was tough. That was a tough day. I went in the first truck stop I went to, I took a shower, and all that, but it was horrible. But then there was another lead place where I picked up lead blocks there in Indianapolis, and they actually block and brace them for you. I do a lot of these, tractors and shopping carts that require to block and brace. So yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right on that, Urban Network.
I added the link to the FMCSA load securement manual in the chat.
There you go. Yeah, and they sell that book at the truck stops as well.
So. Well, and what's funny is I had some customers that we have the same issue where the things like forklifts, tractors, coils, steels, aluminum bars should be secured inside a trailer. And you would think that shippers who have these kind of things, and they've been doing this for a while, would have a little safety orientation for drivers, especially if they're on the spot market where they don't use the same, if they don't have contract carriers. If you have a contract carrier, you can teach your carrier once, saying, hey, we're going to teach you once. And the expectation is that you're going to teach all your drivers, right? And that's in a simple way. If you're on a contract like that, you're hauling certain freight. If you're a carrier and there's certain requirements, well, go make a video for it and teach your staff, right? Have an example. Get one of the loads, bring it back to your yard, show exactly what happens there. And you can even go to the extent and ask the customer saying, hey, on the next load, do you mind if we videotape? We won't show any of your staff, and we won't show your building, and we'll cover off the name of the brand name on there, but we'll just make the video to show how it gets loaded and how you secure it and so forth. And I had a customer where I was kind of having issues with this, and they kept saying, well, the drivers aren't securing it properly. And I'm like, well, you guys aren't even checking it, number one. And number two, you got these drivers that are coming in that don't know. They say, oh yeah, there's a bin of wood blocks, and go ahead and block it all. Well, why not create the video teaching the drivers how to do it? But then the problem is, from a shipper standpoint, is when they do something like that, say, okay, driver, you have to come in and watch this video. And if that video, if the driver messed up something, well, I followed the video. And if, all it takes is that company may have a brand new loading person. It's their third day, fourth day, fifth day on the job. And they went to check it themselves, and they're not that experienced yet themselves, and they're an employee for the company. And they thought things were fine, and it met that's why some shippers don't like to check. That's why, look at Ritchie Brothers. If anyone has ever picked up at Ritchie Brothers, particularly if you've picked up equipment like a telehandler, a tractor, where you back up to one of their loading ramps, ask anyone on this thing if you've done any flatbed work at Ritchie Brothers. What do? They'll bring that telehandler. Often they want you to drive it yourself, but worst case, they'll bring it up to the edge of the ramp, turn it, they'll hand you the keys, and then they walk away. They don't want to watch you. They purposely do not want to watch you. They won't spot you. The only thing Ritchie Brothers will do is if they say, yeah, here's the keys, it's in lot number, so on this side of the yard. And then if you call them saying, hey, I'm here, but it won't start, they'll get their truck, they'll come and boost it, they'll get it started. That's it. That's the only extra help they'll do. And, they're okay with, like, for example, if you go pick up skids, like, say it's a big blade, or an attachment to a tractor where it's not the tractor, then as a driver, you have to know your weights. So you can tell them, hey, put it at the front, put it at the back, or put it in the middle. They'll load it where you want it. But once it's on, they're out. Like, you have to, basically, I have a whole spiel for Ritchie Brothers. Like I got a little paragraph, and I basically say, like, I asked the carrier, "Is your driver experienced with Ritchie Brothers?" No. Well, okay, so are they prepared to learn or not learn? Well, because if they're not, I'm not going to give you the load, because it's buyer beware at Ritchie. Like, they're a nice company, nice people, but they have a lot of expectations on the drivers, and you have to have your wits about yourself when you're at Ritchie Brothers to know what you're doing. That's
to wheel burner, and those that's good that you pay attention. Some brokers don't pay attention to that, but to Will Burner's comment, I remember I picked up, or I was delivering this white, I forget what chemical it was. It was the big huge bags, pallet bags. I was delivering to Monsanto there in St. Louis. Like, you could throw a rock from the bridge on right off of US or Illinois 3, and they had to verify that I was who I was. They had to call my company to make sure I was who I was. I had to put on these crappy overalls, I had to put on hard hat, the whole 9 yards, a respirator. I had to put on one of those. And then I had to watch this 15-minute video. And then all that just to say that you were only allowed to get out of your trailer to open the doors, and that was it. And so you're sitting here in these overalls. God, who knows, who's worn them. All this safety gear on, and the guy that unloaded me was in a t-shirt and shorts and not even wearing a hard hat. I was like, but they made you go through all that whole spiel for security, and you had to, and I've been to steel plants, like a lot of times in van you'll do copper plates, and there's a lot of safety. I mean, those will cut your straps, and there's a lot of safety in that as well.
There was a steel coil place I was picking up at that what their rule was, and again, this is why the difference between the good and the bad brokers and carriers are. I had a steel coil place where they expected the drivers, when they arrived, they had a workbench. The drivers had to go in. They had the wood there, but the drivers had to cut the wood to the length that they want. Then they had the wedges, and then you had to screw the wedges on top of the wood so that you could build the steel coils yourself. So every driver was out in the back building them themselves. So if you weren't prepared to do that, because some carriers don't do that, some drivers won't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So and then summary, I have another facility I pick up often from and deliver to for a client, and it's a plant, but it's so severe, like no pets. If you have a pet, or if you have a second driver, whether that's team driver, super single, or whatever, it's your wife, or the female is the driver and the male is the boyfriend, or whatever, and if there's two people in the truck or a dog, the second person and the dog are not allowed in. I had a driver, he knew a place he had to go get his dog dropped off, because he does have his dog. And the other thing that I tell the carriers is that you have to be willing, because this place takes the mirror, they do the underneath the semi truck check for contraband and stuff, but they also fully inspect the inside of the cab. So you have to be allowed, and you're thinking, we're within Canada here, because of this plant, there's things have gone on in the past. They do full security checks on everything. So they're searching your vehicle to make sure there's no contraband, bombs, guns, weapons, things of this nature. So if you're not willing to get your truck, once through it over, you're not going to this place.
Oh, so, yeah, I delivered at an ammo plant there in Independence, Missouri, and they're one of like two customers I've ever had actually get inside the truck and like look around in the sleeper and everything, and I wasn't carrying back then, but I did have a couple of knives, and they were more worried about my laptop, and so I had to bring in my laptop to their office, put it in a locker, and also they had to do a background check while I was in there.
And probably if you had GoPros, things of that nature, they probably didn't like those.
Yep, I had to take all the cameras down. And I asked them about carrying. They said, "Well, you would just put that in the locker too. We have no issue with that." But military bases won't do that. Military bases, I know people that will leave it at like an offsite locker or a hotel. they'll get a hotel room and they'll just put it there. Same thing with the pet. The pets, they won't let you bring the pets, and a lot of paper plants and food plants are like that.
And that's to Will Berner's point, the COIA, that's where a lot of shippers do not take on responsibilities, hence lumpers. That's always boggled my mind. You're going to a warehouse where it's not like it's just a 3PL warehouse. It's literally a company warehouse, but yet they don't hire enough staff to unload the trucks. Instead, they rely on lumpers.
Mm-hmm.
Because why? They don't want to have the risk, and because a lumper, it's pay per use, and they're letting all the other people involved in the transaction of the shipment paying for that service. So it cuts their warehouse cost down to nothing. And there's a lot of facilities like that where they don't want to give the driver too much information. They don't want to give too much instruction, because if their instructions led to the driver they missed one step, or they realized that their instructions missed one step, and the insurance company poked a hole in those instructions, it puts them at liability. So, yeah.
Nevada, I don't see a whole lot of military base loads, but when I do, the ones that I've called had issues with that. I know Whiteman Air Force Base won't let you check it in anymore. You can't even bring it on the property. They will not take responsibility for it. So, and I've picked up and delivered at Whiteman Air Force Base there in northern Missouri a few times before I was carrying, and I double check with them because there's some really good loads that come in and out of there that I see on the board, and they won't do it there. Now there are others that might, but you definitely have to call it before you book that load to make sure that they'll let you check it in. Some will check it in and they'll put it in a locker, and others will say, "No, you better not come on here with that." And sucks to be you if you do. So
one of the most unique loads that I actually was physically.
Hey, Snorelord.
Oh, go ahead, Gary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, try to sneak in a procedural question on the broker side to see if I could get an idea of what's a good procedure as far as being a broker, like like the straps. So if a broker bids a job, doesn't matter if it's flatbed or not, and then they've secured their bid, and then the market seems to be going up and down, and individuals, brokers like to say that it's all based on supply and demand. Well, if they bid and they already have the contract at a certain contracted rate, what does that have to do with supply and demand, or is that just a way to secure profits by blending out the peaks and valleys? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I could elaborate it, and it's a twofold answer. Unfortunately, in world of logistics, rarely is there cut and dries. When you see that a broker says, we're on a contract, this is all we can pay, I would suspect that when you dived into it, is a higher volume commodity, like loads of shingles, loads of lumber, loads of, anything that's a higher volume. I would say when they say this is the rate, that would be, and if it's on the load boards with the price looking low, that's probably two things on there. One, it's a high volume commodity, and two, the shipper is shopping the market. So the brokers are trying to be competitive, right? Those majority, I would say, if you looked at the flatbed market, majority of the great loads are not on the load boards. The brokers are moving them, but they keep it within their network, because flatbed is so tricky with knowledge and skill that if you have unique items or higher end valued items, like where chaining and strapping is required, or chaining with chains and binders are required, like say you have some tractors that fit on a step deck, things of that nature, those don't always hit the load boards. And if they are, guess how they're moving? The companies that are shipping these, i.e. the green companies with the green equipment, or some of the yellow equipment out there, they have their own load boards, and they have their own set of approved carriers and brokers. So it's staying in that network. And those ones, again, you're still, it doesn't mean that you're getting paid more. It's just staying within a certain network. So I can't speak for all brokers, because a lot of brokers are out there just flogging, trying to win the loads. Like because if you get a shipper who's out there and they're blasting out an email where there's like 30 loads, well, the shipper's just trying to cover those loads at the cheapest price, even if it's steel coils. I used to be on a steel coil list for a company, and that's how they did it. So you kind of have to look at the commodity. You have to look at how the shipper's operating. So it takes time you have to be able to understand when you call a shipper and they say, oh yeah, sure, we'll add you to our system. Well, there's some tips and tricks to tell. When you get an email from a shipper about a load, you're thinking, oh great, I got this load, they're calling me. Well, you need to distinguish, the email you received, was that email part of a distribution list? Or was that email specifically to you? And that makes a huge difference. If you know they're calling on you and they're relying on you to come through, how you quote that is much different than if you know you're just one name of 20 on their list. It makes a huge, huge difference. So does that kind of make sense? Like, because I look at flatbedding as go ahead.
Yeah, it doesn't entirely make sense or doesn't entirely address the question, and I'll elaborate and provide some more information. See, there's a circumstance where a carrier has a brokerage, and there's also the circumstance where a shipper has a brokerage. So if we're talking about independently operated organizations here as a separate entity of a brokerage, if all the money is coming from the shipper to support the brokerage, then there really is no contracted rate that the brokerage works within. Therefore, it's always just trying to strip out any cost savings via brokering out the work. And then that's if the shipper is the controlling interest in the brokerage or some other affiliation. So basically what I'm trying to determine is if you have an independent entity,
Oh, you cut out there.
Uh-oh, Gary, you have broken up. So,
His
Gary,
signals.
if you can hear us, your signal just took a dump. There he goes. So,
well, I would say maybe Steve can elaborate a little bit, but I would say this. I know for a fact that because you brought up a lot there. A shipper may have their own brokerage and a carrier may have their own brokerage. I know from carriers that I know personally that worked for a company that had brokerage and the carriage side, and often those carriers if you have owner operators, that's how sometimes drivers do get a little bit screwed over in a sense, because they will some freight, what they'll do is they'll sell it back to the brokerage, and then the broker puts it back out there, and when they sell it to that owner operator at the 80%, they're getting it at the 80% of the brokered rate versus what the actual customer rate is. So does that kind of address that? I think that in one sense that, yeah, when a carrier has both a carrier and a brokerage, you have to, if you're going to enter a relationship with them, you have to understand that, yeah, when someone has those layers like the brokerage, the carrier, the brokerage, or the shipper, it does get watered down. It truly does. There's no question about that. Things get watered down from, by the time you get paid. So, I had a carrier that was working for a company, and what he noticed was, hey, all the company guys, he would see these nice loads with equipment going on the flatbeds, and he knows after a while he realized, hey, that's all. This is before the load board days. All the drivers would come into the office and they're sitting there waiting for their loads, and they would see all these loads leaving, and all the company guys with the owner operators were sitting in the back, and what they'd end up with: lumber, shingles, cheap commodities. They saw equipment, nice high-end expensive equipment, and those were all on company trucks. So what does that tell you? The company was using their cheap drivers, their company drivers, to haul the high-end freight, and the owner operators who are on percentage freight, they were giving them the low volume, cheap freight. Does that start to address that topic a little bit?
Sorry, Snorelord. I'm going to jump off here because I either got throttled or booted for resources or something. So low resources, you know. So
Gary, did that start
I appreciate you letting me come in.
I know you're taking off there, but hopefully that started to address that, the idea that how, a carrier and brokerages can water down the system as far as the money at the end of the day.
Yeah, my concentration, graduate degree concentration is in supply chain and management of the supply chain. So, you know, there are some issues out here that if you want to call it education, some people might need to know about so they don't enter into, you know, a circumstance that they have no ability to support.
Gary, where you want me
I'm going to go ahead and go.
Gary, where you want me to look at Omaha?
Sorry?
Where you want me to look at Omaha for flatbed loads on the low board? I've got that brought up.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll just jump off because I think I'm getting throttled, or StreamYard might not have an infrastructure large enough to handle the volume that it's getting if it forecasted that wrong. I'm not sure where the issue lies with some of these connection issues, but I believe that I'm under resourced because I'm getting choppy sound. Yeah.
Yeah, you seem fine now.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well,
All right.
I'll glance on the low board for you.
I'll just go ahead and go because. Okay. Right. Yeah, I'll definitely be watching and maybe even comment.
All right. All right.
Well,
I appreciate it. Thank you. Yep. Thank both of you. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Excellent. Thank you, Gary.
See you, Gary.
Be safe.
I would say Gary sounds like if Gary hears this, I think maybe Steve, we need to have Gary come back on at a time maybe when he's on a stronger network and maybe as a separate topic. It sounds like he's got some great insights to discuss around the supply chain and knowledge. Yeah. I think that sounds like he might have some great topics to address to you that maybe he could talk to you off air and see if that would formulate a conversation. I don't know, but it seems like he's got some insight.
Well, I noticed that he's one of these guys that put in this category. I've got a few friends of mine that came from other business backgrounds that are in the trucking world, and they're utilizing their outside of the box viewpoints to kind of bring up different topics that a lot of people either miss the boat or, you know, not a whole lot of people talk to, or, you know, kind of like your knowledge. You know, Jackknife said that there should be 200 people in this live feed right now. Right there shows you the problem. Guys are too busy watching TikTok videos instead of gaining knowledge to run their business. Because of the things that you share. I mean, the videos that you and I do usually do pretty good because you're not giving the perspective of a truck driver. You're giving the perspective of your side of the phone and what you deal with. And you've got different layers that you deal with. You're not just like a one-trick pony.
And I'll just say another comment, and I'll jump off so you can get onto your load board coverage and stuff as well. But I wanted to just remind that when people think about getting into the world of freight brokering, and if you're a carrier and you've gone out and got your authority, but your brokerage authority, but you haven't utilized it yet, I think that you've had some great conversations with DIY Semi, because he's probably the person I would say that you could attest the most to, because DIY Semi has his carrier and he's, you know, activated his brokerage in the past year. He can tell you firsthand what I'm about to say is that being a broker from the outside, the simplistic version of a broker is you call a shipper, they're willing to work with you, you get them some credit, they give you a load, you book the truck moves, you generate the invoice, you pay the carrier, you get paid by the customer, the transaction's done. That sounds really simple. Getting the customer is the first hurdles. It can take, if you have no direct customers and you've never cold called customers and you have, you know, it's going to be completely new to you. Give yourself 4 months 3 to 4 months before you secure that first load, on average. Not saying it's not going to happen sooner. It could happen sooner. But your first hurdle is that 3 to 4 months filling that sales pipeline. Okay. And when you're as a broker, like if you're a carrier and you have a broker authority, I've talked a little bit about this to you, Steve, is that you have to pick how you're choosing your brokerage to run. Are you going customer driven, mode driven, or lane driven? You're going to say, well, what's the difference? Well, what would that matter? It matters huge. Because if you're focused on customer driven, which is what I do, I find a customer that has freight to move. I can accommodate that customer from one pallet going from Florida to Whitehorse, Yukon. And I can say that same customer, I can move a truckload, and I can move intermodal rail, I can move dangerous goods. But that requires a whole lot of training, skill, knowledge, and insight. Mode driven says, if you're calling customers, you have to go in with like a horse with blinders. If all you want is dry van freight, if they call and say we do flatbed business, great. Thanks for your time. Have a nice day, and you move on to your next one. If all you want is dry van freight, that's mode driven. If you want flatbed only, same thing. You call a shipper. Yeah, we do 80% of our business is dry van and 20% is flatbed. Okay, I'm interested in your flatbed business. But they might say, well, we want a broker that can do both. Or they want someone, they've had some struggles. That's the mode driven. And then there's lane driven, where you are focusing on a certain lane. And this ties back to, if you go back to some of Steve's old videos that I've been on, ties in, the lane model can tie into what we call the Chicago model of freight brokering. The Chicago model is as follows. You find a customer from point A to point B, let's say from Chicago to Houston, Texas. And most brokers, because what's the question that James Best, Steve, has asked and said numerous times again, asking that broker, do you have loads outbound from that state to the next place? And that's what the Chicago model does. The Chicago model will take their salespeople and saying, hey, we now have 5 customers running these certain lanes, going from point A to point B. So what we're going to do is, instead of going out to find new alternative customers, we want new customers, but we want to find customers that have freight in Texas, going back somewhere close to Chicago. Because now, if we've taken the time to do this, we can offer our carriers that round trip experience. So it's a more difficult process, because you have to go in again with blinders. Because if you call a shipper in Houston and they don't go back to the Midwest, they're only going to Florida, you might take their information if you have a big enough sales team. But if you're a small brokerage and you're trying to create this back and forth business, you have to choose how you want to manage that. So it takes a lot more time to do this, but you can do it if you're persistent. So those 3 levels there, and getting the customer is that first hurdle. Once you fill your pipeline, then after that, the customer relationship side is a big piece, but it's the details. How you manage these loads and manage it with your carriers is really going to be finding out the appropriate details. All this stuff takes so much time and effort at the beginning to have this process, and so that you can then repeat it with new customers. And that's the difference. Like, I'm sure you can tell when you get brokers that give you good instructions versus bad, and all the good pickup numbers, good appointment times, delivery times, all that takes time. So the whole point is, don't underestimate the process of being a good freight brokerage, because it takes a lot of time.
Yep, I agree 100%.
So,
well, thanks, Rob, for coming in.
Yep, Happy New Year to you and everyone else.
Happy New Year, and thank you for all the insight that you give us. I really, really appreciate your friendship and support.
Awesome. Have a good one, guys.
All right, later. All right, guys, we'll take a look at a low board here. By request, Gary was wanting to see flatbed loads out of Omaha. Not too much going on. This is for today, tomorrow, Sunday, and Monday. And obviously, there's not going to be a whole lot on the weekends because it's flatbed freight. Let's refresh this here. This is what you got. There's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 loads with that 150-mile radius. Your highest rate is $1,300, $1.78 a mile, going from Spicard, Missouri, going to South Lyon, Michigan. It's a hot shot load. That's why it's so cheap. Then you got $3.89 a mile going from Des Moines to Little Canada, Minnesota. That sounds like a cold place. Everything else is around the $500-$600 range. Here's one for $900 going to Kansas. Let's take a look at this map here. So basically, out of Wichita there. So that's all you got going on, Gary. So, but anyways, we won't dwell on the low board stuff too much. This video is already almost at 2 hours. We'll finish some comments up, and then we'll so let's back up here. So we got Cash is King. We got royalty in the house, literally, because he's a king. Get it? Let's see. Jackknife. There's okay. I already read that. How are you feelings, Cash? Good morning, sir. When rates take a dump, there's too many hands in the cookie jar, especially when you're paying 30% to your carrier, also and paying all your own bills. The difference is that's like that all the time, just not when the rates are taking a dump. So, Big Houston, good morning. Speaking of flatbedders, Jackknife, I assume they're all just watching Shane's best empty chair from his last live stream. Yeah, I guess I'm not there to run his live feed this time. It's always fun though to watch him snore on the couch and fart. As far as securement goes, it is my responsibility, not a shipper. Yep, that's absolutely true. To me, it's really sad that flatbed's taking a crap as bad as it is. There's a lot of good, hardworking professionals on that side of the industry. I think it just shows you, though, the economic turn that we're going to see in the economy as a whole. I think flatbed will easily filter out the bad drivers. I think between load securement, fines, and not willing to work hard. I mean, I talked to somebody that had a flatbed, didn't want to chain or tarp. Well, that really kind of severely limits. So if you're in an area like Omaha where there's only like 15 loads, yeah, that doesn't leave you a whole lot of options. So what do you do, right? Like I don't get how truck drivers, especially people with their own authority, don't get how brokers work. Just go look for your own insurance for your authority and the amount of time and aggravation. G-Star, good morning, everyone. Mr. Snorelord, greetings from Green Bay, getting that early pickup to go home. Good deal. I used to haul jet engines, very, very high value. If you don't know proper securement, you're not going to be hauling or in business past the first Met line. Yep. So, Christian Truckers in the house. How's it going, my friend? How are you doing? Hopefully, 2023 is your year, my friend. I know that you've had some struggles this year, but you know what? All is well, right? All is well. So, anyways, guys, I think I'm going to end this feed here. We're at 2 hours. I appreciate every single person. If you don't mind, go watch the replay if you missed what I talked about. I talked about some strategies for the first quarter, the freight that I look for in a van. And then at about 54 minutes, we had CDN come in and he gave some knowledge. And then him and Gary had some good question and answer sessions. And, it's I hope the knowledge helps you. And if not, I hope it at least entertains you. So, if I don't see you guys again before New Year's Day, which I might go live Saturday night, it just depends. That will be the anything, anywhere, kind of topic stuff. I'll probably go live on the small channel as well. If you don't mind, subscribe to my other channel, Snorelord OG, so I can at least get a direction with that. And then if you're interested in the 123 low board, 48065, and for your code to try it for 30 days for free, and then it's $35 a month after that with all the tools that I've displayed at times. And I really appreciate every single person. You guys have made 2022 my best year when it comes to YouTube, and I appreciate that very much. And here's to looking forward to 2023. So with that being said, have a good day, and strength for today, hope for tomorrow. Bang your head, be intense. Later.